I have a great pleasure to talk tonight with Olga Kisseleva, the artist based in France but working internationally, mostly because of the exhibition we can see in ŁAৰীষ্টNIA Center for Contemporary Art in Gdańsk, the exhibition Trees of Memory, Roots and Runners. This exhibition and this talk is realized in the frames of the Trees of Memory, Roots and Runners project, which is implemented by the Past Future Art platform in partnership with the Ukrainian Institute. Welcome, Olga, to Gdańsk. I've been observing your art, as you know, for many years, and I'm very happy finally to see part of this here in Poland, in Gdańsk. There is several issues to talk about, to discuss, but I think that it makes sense to start with the project we are having in Gdańsk at the moment. I'd like to ask you, firstly, to explain the project itself and especially its context, how it was prepared by the works you made previously. What is the direct neighborhood for this piece, your interest, and finally, I'd like to talk about relation of your very personal, individual perspective in art with art and science field, because all this come together in this work and in many others of you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the curators, and thank you very much to the ŁAৰীষ্টNIA Art Center for hosting this exhibition. And in fact, this project is a kind of branch, a part of big project we are developing with an international team since about 10 years. This project is called Eden, and maybe we can start by seeing a short film presenting this project.
Eden represents an artistic utopia assuming that extinction, despite its supposedly definitive and irreversible characteristics, can be revoked thanks to the advancement of contemporary human civilization. Eden starts in 2013 after the restoration of the elm of Biscarrosse, a tree located in the center of the French town of Biscarrosse that died a victim of the Dutch elm disease, a pathology responsible for the disappearance of most elm trees in the French landscape. After this happened, we were invited to create a monument to commemorate the elm that held a very important place within the town's identity because of its long history of more than 600 years. When we started the preliminary works for the realization of this commission, we contacted the elm specialists of the INRA, the Institut National de la Recherche Agronomique, and, by exchanging a dialogue with them, we developed a project that articulated scientific research and artistic creation. Working closely with the team of researchers, we were able to mix the genes of the elm of Biscarrosse with genes of the Siberian elm to create a new variety of elm resistant to the Dutch elm disease. We then planted them in the same place the old tree was, articulating it with an aluminum sculpture, creating a monument using biotechnology as a means for artistic creation. Ever since the restoration of this particular elm, we have been working together with the INRA to restore the elm forests, which are now close to disappearing from Southern Europe. Our project became well known, and our interdisciplinary team received invitations from different parts of the world to work on different species of trees. Thanks to these numerous commissions, with the team of researchers, we developed a series of sensors and captors that allow us to perceive and to understand the communications the trees exchange with their environment in the form of molecular emissions, electric or sound signals. Then we worked with Orange Telecom and with the Institute of Applied Ecology to create an adapted network to vehicle what the trees communicate. Thanks to this technology, we were able to work on different species around the world, such as the apharsimon, an ancestral tree extinct for more than 2,000 years, which we were able to bring back to life in the Negev desert in Israel. The Bodhi Julian, a very important tree within the Buddhist symbolism in the glory palace of the Forbidden City of Beijing. The indigenous species of kauri, rimu, and totara in New Zealand that hold a very important place in the early history and culture of the Maori. We also worked with different cedars, from the Chateaubriand cedar, a remarkable tree, a part of the garden in the Cartier Foundation in Paris, to the Wollemi pine, an ancestor of cedar trees which has been isolated in the Australian Blue Mountains for several thousands of years, that we connected through a network to the Chateaubriand cedar, along with Japanese cedars living in their natural environment. As such, the Wollemi pine can gather knowledge on the contemporary world and environment from its descendants. By working on this project, and thanks to the sensors developed by the scientific team of the INRA, we implemented different approaches to communicate and interact with the trees connected to our network. Thus, we can monitor what the trees are communicating, and we can then determine if there is any need for an intervention in order to preserve the tree and its environment. In the first place, we established the tree-to-network communication, a type of exchange with the tree that perceives the messages which the tree is sending into our central network to then translate them into messages comprehensible by humans. In the second place, we established the tree-to-tree communication that allows us, thanks to the network we developed with Orange Telecom, to connect trees across continents and across species, so that they can communicate with each other in case one of the species can learn something from a different tree that can be useful for its survival and preservation. As a result of these scientific explorations, we were able to take the data gathered from the trees and translate it into different types of art forms. Dynamic linguistic transcriptions of the communications from the trees were created with local trees for the Guangdong Museum of Art in Guangzhou, for the Cartier Foundation in Paris, for the Perth Institute of Contemporary Arts in Australia, for the Negev Art Museum, and for the Pompidou Center in Paris. Sound installations based on the amplification of the sound generated from the circulation of sap were created in collaboration with the Institute of Applied Ecology and with BioArt Society for the Roe Contemporary Art Biennale. In New Zealand, we collaborated with the Maori community, the Auckland University of Technology, and with the Auckland Philharmonic to build a musical performance created from the analysis of the communications coming from a kauri tree. The most complex and impressive art experience we have developed until this point is the in situ installation we presented in Japan for the Echigo Tsumari Art Triennale, transmitting the communications from the Chateaubriand cedar in Paris, as well as the Japanese cedar and Wollemi pine, in real time, in the form of light signals that create a 3D light installation. Eden takes the experience and the information from the scientific research and transforms it into an artistic proposal, allowing humans to fully comprehend the experience of the tree. The artistic exposition constitutes the ultimate expression of scientific exploration by the translation of data into an experience which humans can immerse themselves into and understand what the trees communicate with their environment.
Thank you very much. The Trace of Memory project is slightly different from the approach you presented in the very beginning of Eden. You deal with trees and plants in a different way and probably in different reasons.
Yes, this project we had a long way of interaction with trees to came to this stage of the project. First, we we was here just helping trees, just trying with the elm to make it reborn. We worked with drunken forest in the north of Europe and in Canada to help the tree to survive the climate change. We worked with urban trees to help them to resist to the urban environment. And finally, we worked on the restoration of disappeared tree, like the Metushalich, that palm tree in Negev desert. So the first step was just helping the nature. And for this reason, we had to develop a system to listening to trees, to make a kind of monitoring, to be in relation with them, because trees are very slow organisms, and we cannot just make a reparation in a few minutes and go to another project. It's years and years of work. So we developed a system of monitoring with two ways of communication, tree-to network, which helped us, for example, to work with kauri trees and to create this system making kauri trees to speak into to the human population of New Zealand. And tree to tree, when we make trees to speaking together across the continent, and through this way, we, for example, we were still helping trees. So we, for example, connected this Volimi pine tree in Australia, which is a tree which doesn't exist no more, but they found out few trees like very deep in Blue Mountains, and the deal was to bring them back to the nature, to take it out from this very closed and preserved valley and put it back to the forest. And for this, there's a value. They was conserved here, like disconnected from all environment during 10,000 years, and we connected them to the Japanese cedar and Japanese Alps, because Volimi pines are in fact the ancestor of cedars, and also with Chateaubriand cedar in Paris, like this, like to the half of the world. And then Volimi pine learned today's environment from from contemporary trees. And by listening to trees also, we started to learn from them. We understood the trees have intelligence, they have strategy, they have memory, and they have a lot of knowledge which can be helpful for human. They also have like very fine strategy. For example, we worked with this also disappeared Afarsemon tree in Negev desert, which used to be a holy tree for Jewish people 2,000 years ago, and then they used it for the temple by making a kind of oil which was be burned by Koans and Levi in the temple, and going directly to the sea to God. But when the country was occupied by Rome, they burned it all forest, and this tree was not existing no more. So we helped to restore this tree, and especially to reintroduce it in the nature. And when we monitored these trees in Negev desert, we also, in parallel, we worked with mirror tree in Jordan, other side of Jordan River. We realized the word used by trees when they spoke to us was the same other side of Jordan River. Of course, it was not tree who was speaking, it was scientist who was translated the talks of trees. But from other side of the river, we worked with Arabic scientists, and it was translated into Arabic, and other side, it was Israeli scientists, it was translated into Hebrew. But the word was the same, because the tree was so clever. In this part of the world, they used only the common expression, which are the same in Hebrew and in Arabic. So the trees are able to communicate together without any translation. And humans, not always, especially in some areas. So this is the word in Hebrew and Arabic. And for the exhibition, we created a special writing which included both languages together in each word. So it is a kind of new writing which can be understood by Jewish and Arabic people, both sides of Jordan River, and we presented this exhibition similarly in two museums in Jordan, a National Art Museum and in Negev Museum of Art. It was maybe the first time I realized that a tree could be more clever than human. And also 2 years ago, we had a very strong experience in Wrocław when the communicating tree, the tree which was communicated with human, was exhibited in front of the first artificial intelligence sculpture realized by Polish sculptor. What is his name? Do you remember the name of the author of the sculpture?
Edward Ignatowicz.
Yes, Edward Ignatowicz. Yes. And it was like a kind of confrontation, the intelligence of nature and the intelligence of machine. And we also worked with native populations all across the world, with Maori people in New Zealand, but also with native population of America, on the native way of communication with trees, which are sometimes more efficient still now than our very high technology way to deal with nature. And finally, when we, by helping the trees and by listening to them and by learning to them, we arrived to the concept of trees of memory.
Yes, I would say that it was a process of accepting autonomy of trees, building the consciousness of autonomy on non-human livings, approaching the basis of post-humanism as a new way of thinking about the earth, about our world. But all these three processes composing the whole, even they were developed around the trees, firstly to let them survive, next to try to listen to them, and finally to understand them. But trees of memory, this is slightly another approach, not so post-humanistic, rather anthropologic. It looks like you try to engage trees in human history.
Okay, now we are in Poland here. The Poland is it's very important place to explain the concept, because it, as I understand, the name of the country comes from Poljana. And Poljana, it is, I don't know if you say Poljana in Polish, but in like a little bit more east from Poland, we say Poljana, which is a place in the forest around it of trees. So Polish people use it to live like with trees, in the middle of trees, in the middle of forest.
I was taught that the name comes from the tribe Polanie, which is the group of people.
Yes, but tribe Polani, we called Polani because we lived in Polyanas.
In the forest.
In the forest, yes.
Okay. It
yes.
can work.
So here, even the name of the country underscored the relation between human and trees, and interaction and exchange we always had. So the project Trees of Memory started here in Kiev, in Babi Yar, which is a place like you see the form of this yar. How to say it in English? Yar. What is it? It is.
A small valley.
Valley, yeah, small valley. Yeah, it was a small valley in the forest. The valley was empty, of course, but it was surrounded by trees, and like about 30,000 of people was killed there, right, or maybe more. In the beginning and during the Second World War. So we killed so many people, then the valley was not existing no more. It was like full of the bodies. And when the German left, we was living, we put some chemical product on this body to hide the traces of this crime. Then when Russians came, they was not interested at the moment for the commemoration of this crime. So we put other products, and we put the forest here. It became like just a forest and empty place, and there is not enough, in fact, documents, not enough objects, even to identify the people who is entered here. We can even, we don't know how many people are there. And when I was confronted to this story in the frame of a research project and a project of a memorial, which maybe one day will be built there, my idea was to bring back the memory of these people who became what we became in the ground here, with only trees coming from this ground. For me, these people became trees. And it is also something close to some religious tradition. Then, for example, in Asia, in Skiffs area, we put the dead people in kurgan, and then we plant some trees, and the soul of the people go to trees. But physically and scientifically, the body of these dead people also become trees, because trees take the energy and take the material to develop himself and to live from the ground, and the body of these people became ground. So this is the actual view of this territory, and no more this valley, only trees. And this is a map of all trees in Babi Yar, and we worked with representatives of each category of these trees by analyzing what is recorded in their body. Some of these trees was present during the tragedy. Some of them grown up after and took the memory of the people killed there. And from this information, we realized this artwork, which is in two parts for each tree. Each tree we worked together. It is a kind of portrait of tree, when you can see the tree itself, and it is a visual translation of the recording of memory we obtained from these trees with our captors.
For me, the title of your piece is very significant, very meaningful. Trees of Memory. I will stop with this first part of the whole title, because this is about symbolic role. You want the tree to carry on. I realized that your approach is another step towards building the real living monument. With the first one, I got acquainted when I was curating more than 10 years ago Biennale of Contemporary Art in Poland. I invited Sania Ivekovic, Croatian artist, with her installation Rohrbach Living Monument, or Rohrbach Living Memorial, because she began with the photograph presenting the group of Roma people sitting on the grass and waiting to be dislocated in the concentration camp. They obviously were brought there to be killed later on. And Sania Ivekovic realized then that there is almost no monument of Roma killed so numerously during the Second World War, in comparison with Jewish people, for example. And she decided to make this kind of monument. She invited people, Rohrbach, Austrians, little town residents to participate in the performance. They were invited one day to come to a certain place, to sit down as on this photograph and try to think about those people. She believed that only monuments built in human consciousness can survive historical events. And I see something similar in your project, but you don't ask people to play, to perform. You ask trees. You ask them to perform for us people the memory of what happened in Babin Yar. Obviously inviting people to cooperate, because there is no other way to participate. Trees perform, but humans should join this performance. And this is why the memory of tragedy in Babin Yar can come back and stay with the people as a memento. Can you agree with such approach?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for this beautiful metaphor and beautiful example and relation with Sanya's work. However, it is not only like a kind of performative imaginary, what happened with trees. With the technology we elaborated for Babin Yar project, we went to other places of tragedy, and we worked with trees which was present on different places of catastrophe. In Mauthausen, in collaboration with Ars Electronica, but also in Auschwitz-Birkenau. And what we realized then in all these places, the trees are like the hard disks of the nature, which record the time and which allow us to go up in the time. And on all these trees, we see the big difference in onion circles of the time when the catastrophe was here, and few years after, which the traces of catastrophe was here and was absorbed by trees. And we, for the moment, we did not manage to realize the monument in Babin Yar, only the exhibition which we show in museums. But we are now working on a live monument for the Gurs camp in France, which had the very heavy history because they interned there the Spanish Republicans, then Jewish people during the Second World War, then German soldiers after this war, and then also Rome people and Algerians. And after they put the forest, of course, to hide the trace of this camp. And also since we discovered this faculty of trees to keep memory and to deliver it, and to bring a kind of peace by this way to open a new way of commemoration. We was invited just a few weeks ago to think about a monument in Guernica village. Everybody know this village, which was completely erased by Germans during the Second World War, because, of course, of the Picasso painting. But there is a kind of internal monument in this village, which is the oak tree, which keeps the memory of this village. And we are now working on the extraction of memory of this tree and making it visible, not only in the goal of commemoration, but in the goal of making peace in this area, which is now also quite live a quite difficult history with a different movement of independent people. So I hope our next step with Tree of Memory will bring us to the way of commemoration, like building of future. And maybe the next exhibition will be a Tree of Hope.
Mm. Yes. I'd like to add something else to your description, because I referred the work to the installation of Sanja Ivekovic, just stressing on the similarities. But we can also talk about differences. And those differences, for me, partly come from the field, the way you work, the field you place your works, and the tools you use to make them possible, which altogether compose art and science field. And I'd like you to comment on this context, because I understand that your works, like this one, like Trees of Memory, for example, is kind of artistic research. This is not only about presenting the artwork very empathetic, working very emotionally and very artistically, visually, involving, interesting. But this is also the research, coming to certain knowledge. This is about building some new ways of communicating with non-human beings. I like very much the term holobiont. Holobiont proposed by Lynn Margulis, but made famous with Bruno Latour mostly. This perspective saying that we are all residents of this planet, residents of Earth, and we should learn how to deal each other, how to live together, how to feel responsible for the common territory and for everybody else occupying this territory. And I have a feeling that your work and your other works in this field, Eden, is going this direction also.
Thank you very much. I think there are two theses in your question. The first one is why art and science and how it works. Why we need it now. I think the key word is the art now. It is not to make the world more beautiful. It's a research, like scientific research, and it is to make the world better. So to do this, like just artistic inspiration, I think it is no more enough. We need to a partnership with other researcher, with scientific researcher, and each topic bring us to another branch of science. Sometimes our artistic work can be based on mathematics, another one on psychology, another one on biology, like this one. But we need, like in science, we need something, we need not something, but everything is proven, everything is exact. It not just I see like this, I feel like this, and I make a drawing. It's important to be sure what we are suggesting, and to be able to explain everything in our proposal. The second second part of the question, it is about future of art and also about future of our civilization. As I'm at the beginning, I'm scientist, and I also worked a lot as a scientist and as an artist, going very deep in scientific field. And I've worked and I still work with something which called artificial intelligence or machine learning. Which is reputed to be something which will maybe save our civilization. And what is appearing now, it is this is a kind of way without issue, because the artificial intelligence has many limits. And maybe the best way to find an issue going through artificial intelligence, it is to mix it with the swarm intelligence, which is intelligence of the nature. And only with this kind of algorithms, our human-made anthropocenic artificial intelligence becomes something powerful. So I really believe in this dialogue with trees for our future.
I believe too. I think that we are slowly coming to the end of our conversation. I don't know, Agata, is there any question coming from the listeners, from the audience? No question. Okay, so we can continue. If there is any question, just let us know. Trees of Hope. This is the title of the new part of the project, or just your new idea how to develop it, or this is just what came out from the recent work?
I think it is about new works we are just about develop. I spoke about some of them here, like tree from Guernica village in Spain. There is another one I didn't spoke for the moment, and I don't have any image to present, but I can just explain the concept. Like we don't only work here in Europe, we also work since last year, we work across the Rift Valley, which is a kind of big crack in the skin of the earth. and which is dividing the African continent in two parts now. You know, there is one part which goes in direction of India, and will be a new ocean very soon from Red Sea to Indian Ocean, and the crack is from Bekaa Valley in Lebanon, it's still in Asia, until south of Mozambique. So it's really like the half of African continent which is moving because of Rift Valley. And it is quite heavy process because this moving of continent, it is earthquake, new volcanic coming, like villages with a hole in between houses, no more roads, and dangerous for people, dangerous for environment. And trees are feeling it before human. So now we are about to build also a kind of network with trees, a kind of platform where trees can tell people about the danger coming. Yeah, so it is a perspective.
Very interesting, and it's reminding us that we all live nowadays in the same place. This is planet Earth, and that we should not think only locally, because as trees we communicate each other all over the world, and we should finally recognize each other as residents of the same common huge country, Earth. I want to say that I was happy when you reminded me that the beginnings of Poland, the history of Poland, starts from the forest. That Polana is the place where everything here began. Because it means that an important part of Polish heritage are trees.
Exactly.
In Poland, trees now is cut off so rapidly everywhere. During the last few years, more trees died in Poland than probably many tens years before. So, because in Poland recently, heritage is so important. So I hope that we will remember trees as part of it. I think that we will end now our conversation. Thank you again, Olga, for accepting the invitation to talk. And first of all, thank you for your artworks, for your exhibition. And I hope, not only trees hope, I also hope that you will come back soon with the new part of your project.
With pleasure, and thank you very much for new concepts, new formulation coming from this discussion. We'll try to go through.
Thank you. Everything came from your art. Anyway.
Thank you.